William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink, and the very later Lerone Landis is doing... Patti?
I don't know what he's doing.
Oh, I forgot.
I've forgotten too.
I know. We're terrible. Because we tell each other where we're going to be and what we're going to do, and...
we register that, you're not going to be
You're
here.
not going to be there. He's doing something wonderful. We'll talk to him about it next week when he's back.
Have a great time, Lerone.
If he's in the car driving right now.
Yeah.
Because we don't know.
Yep.
Our guest today is the wonderful Carol West. I've known Carol for 30 years, I guess. And she's never been on our show. Never. Because she has been working when we've been on.
That's true. That's true. Even when we were on Sunday evenings, way back, you were still...
Because there were, so... We never had Carol on, so we're delighted. Carol is the retired pastor of Celebration Community Church. She started her preaching career at what was then MCC Dallas, became Cathedral of Hope. We're going to talk about all the dirt. And Carol, welcome. I'm delighted you're here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Oh,
it's
and
unusual to... Since I don't have a gig on Sundays, it's awfully good to be here.
Yeah, well, this gave you a Sunday gig.
It did. It gave me a Sunday opportunity.
And a drive.
And I promised not to take up an offering, so what do you
please. We're listener supported, so please feel free. Here's how Carol and I were talking a little bit before the show, before Patti screeched in at the last minute. But Carol, you thought you were Jewish until you were 12 years old.
Yeah, my dad worked for a Jewish farm, and we didn't go to church. And I knew about Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and my dad got off for those days. So I just sort of, pretty much assumed I was Jewish.
But you weren't?
No, not at all.
But you did the bagels thing and the lox thing?
Bagels and lox.
That was way before...
Back when people didn't do those in Texas.
Yeah.
And I developed a fondness for lox and bagels back then.
Which is why her church is Celebration Community Church.
I have a Jewish palate.
Apparently. So you found out you weren't Jewish.
I did.
And then you decided to start preaching and went right to divinity school.
Not exactly.
Oh.
I started out of college teaching high school English. Did that for about 18 years. And decided my last year of teaching school that this was not really where I wanted to be. I felt I wasn't being true to who I was and true to myself, and I'd been attending an MCC. And I knew I was supposed to be there, and I started attending and knew I was called to clergy, and got in it. And I never went to seminary. I studied through MCC's program called Samaritan, and basically it was a basic Bible, and they had me, because I had been the executive director of a suicide prevention hotline for 2 years after I left teaching. I didn't want to kick the closet door right open and go from teaching to, by the way. So I was executive director of a suicide prevention hotline, and so what I did during that time, I started taking the classes.
I want to go back a little bit. You were teaching at a time where gay people couldn't be teachers.
Exactly. I was.
And you hit it, or you didn't know, or?
I knew. Yeah. I've known since I was about 5. But I lived 2 lives, and I was, hanging out in Dallas, and I knew the bars in the 60s because that's basically where you went, that and the softball fields. And, and
Where were you teaching?
I was teaching at in Irving.
Oh.
And I went to high school in Irving, and I taught there, and basically went from there to deciding to come out and being at I'd been the training director at a suicide prevention hotline for years as a volunteer, and I became their executive director. And from there, I was jumping through all the hoops to be licensed in MCC, and in 1990 I was licensed, and Reverend Mike Piazza had said, when you're licensed, I want you on staff at, then it was Dallas MCC, and I went on staff.
Which, by the way, was the building where KNON moved out of. Because
Yes.
after
Reagan Brown.
Cathedral of Hope moved,
Exactly, Reagan Brown.
the building sat empty for a number of years, or underused, but then
Yeah.
KNON moved in, and we were there how long? About 7 years?
Oh, yeah. It was the Pink Building.
The Pink Building, right?
Oh yeah, the
Pink House.
Pepto-Bismol pink building. Yeah.
It wasn't pink when we were there. It was, they had changed the pink to olive green.
Well, pink was, we didn't paint it that way, but
It's
it
what
was great
attracted
for
you.
giving direction. We were the only Pepto-Bismol pink building, and it kind of grew on you. Kind of like mold, but it kind of grew.
And that building's no longer there.
Yeah, it's a storage unit now.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Maple and Butler.
Yeah.
Where they haven't put up high, expensive apartments that are tiny in Oak Lawn. They're putting up storage units so you can store your stuff that you can't fit into your tiny little apartment in Oak Lawn now.
Right,
So,
yeah. Can't fit it in the loft.
Right. I love what they're doing to Oak Lawn, which is why we're in North Dallas now. Couldn't find another place
Yeah.
down close to downtown. So when you began your career at Cathedral of Hope, it was about 1989, 1990. That's about when we met. I didn't know your background,
Yeah.
so I just assumed that this broad knows what she's doing.
Yeah,
Because-
I had hit the ground running. It was sort of a trial by fire. I knew basic Bible, and I had basically I learned a lot, and I think the AIDS crisis was very much for me. I really kind of started hanging out there in '86, and Steve Pace was a student clergy, and he was leading the church because Don Eastman had just left, and before Piazza, Pace said, I need some help with funerals. And I'd never done one, and I think I'd been to one in my life. And I said, yeah. And he said, can you do a funeral? I said, oh, yeah, sure. So I read up on them, and I started doing funerals. That's kind of how I started out.
And I bet you did a bunch of them.
I did a bunch, yeah.
Yet you were there right at the height of the AIDS crisis when
I
people...
was there about '86, and I was on staff. I went on staff in '90, but I did a lot of funerals between '86 and '90. And then in '90, of course, I was the AIDS chaplain, and wow, different time.
Do you know, it was a funeral that got me involved and got me going to services again, got me involved with Beth El-Banah. My former partner had passed away. He lived in Atlanta. I was here in Dallas. I went back to Atlanta for the funeral, and when I got there, I said to his partner, okay, you called the rabbi, right? And he said, she's out of town. And I said, who's going to do the funeral? It's today. He said, and we started arguing a little bit. He said, well, why don't you do it? I said, okay. I said, do we have any notes, a book, something that I can use? He said, yeah, the rabbi had left us some notes to choose if we wanted one of these or one of those. Now, I was going to do the eulogy anyway. But I ended up doing the whole service. So everybody came, they're coming in, and there were hundreds of people at this service. And so once it was decided I was the rabbi, everybody's looking at me like I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
because I had 2 hours of experience.
Yes,
So where do you want us to sit? Where do you want us to sit? So I said, I don't know, Luisa's family on this side, John's family that side, parents in front, brothers and sisters with the parents, grandparents, second row.
As long as you don't assign a ring bearer, it's okay.
I heard somebody say, where did they get this, Rabbi? The other person who knew me grabbed her hand and said, shh, just sit down and pray. But we started doing the service, and it was really very nice, because a Jewish funeral generally is very warm, and it's about the person.
Yes.
So I read some of the prayers, I made up some of the Hebrew. Because my Hebrew was a little bit rusty at that time. I hadn't been to services in at least 10 years. And we did it. But before, the funeral director brought me to the back room. He said, would you like to say a prayer over the coffin? I said, sure. So I said, John, you won't believe what your effing family did to us. Amen. Okay, we're ready. But do you know, after that, because we were in the middle of the AIDS crisis, I came home from John's funeral, and I was cleaning out a Rolodex, and I was pulling cards, 1, 2, 3, 4. I got to 50, and I said, this isn't healthy. And I stopped counting, and I haven't counted how many funerals I've been to since.
I quit counting a long time ago. During the midst of the crisis, you might have one on Friday, a couple on Saturday, one on a Sunday afternoon, and maybe a wedding thrown in, and it was a tough time. I think we didn't realize how tough. We were right in the midst of it.
Do you know Mary Franklin, who ran the AIDS food pantry? She was interviewed by NPR in my office, because we had the equipment to have NPR record her, when the Dallas Buyers Club came out, because she had worked at the Dallas Buyers Club. And that was one of the questions. How did you grieve? And she said, oh, we didn't. We went from the hospital to the funeral and ran back to the hospital to take care of the next one.
And a lot of times I would go from one hospital room and someone was pronounced dead to go across the room to sit with someone else. It was not uncommon at all. I tried to make it a habit. When I left after visiting someone, I would go look at the newborn babies. I'd go look at the babies.
It's a fine idea.
Yeah, it was hard. They were dreary days. They were tough days, and so much death, and people got numb. People quit attending funerals.
Yeah.
People had so many friends dying. They just
you couldn't go anymore.
They couldn't handle it.
You went to certain ones. You picked. You chose, and nobody blamed you for not going.
No, everybody understood. They were in the same
take care of yourself.
They were in the same boat, and everyone was. Our community was numb. We really were. And the song from West Side Story, Somewhere. I associate that with funerals still every time I hear it, because it was played at so many funerals.
At John's funeral, they played Bette Midler's From Beaches,
Wings.
Wind Beneath My Wings. And then I came home from the funeral and watched that movie.
Bad mistake.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
I have not seen that movie since.
I can't
because
watch it,
that's, no.
I do not watch AIDS movies. I've never seen most of them.
Yeah,
I lived it. I don't watch
I don't need a movie about it.
I feel that way about so many of them, and I didn't even have that many friends that I can't even imagine what you and David encountered there, but I can't. I have yet to see some of them.
Yeah, it's just, and there's such a change now, because I meet young people and young GLBTQ people, they don't know anyone who's ever died of AIDS, and I think that's a double-edged sword. It's wonderful that we live in a world where they don't, but also I think we need to continue to tell the story and remember.
Right.
We need to never forget.
Right. Yeah, when I tell somebody who's younger about what happened, they just don't kind of believe it.
You probably have to explain what a Rolodex is.
Yeah, you probably. That's true.
My card file.
And it was handily on a big wheel, so all you had to do was spin the wheel.
So, but it was absolutely a terrible time.
It was.
But it was a great time. You know, you said you became a pastor without going to divinity school.
I did.
But boy, did you learn about caring for people. And isn't that more important?
Yes, it was. And I think that's something that really can't be taught. I think that's something you don't learn in divinity school. Most of my education about pastoring was basically trial by fire. And when I went to Celebration, I served there 20 years. They took a risk. I'd never been a senior pastor. And, you know, I had to hit the ground running with 30 people. And I had to sort of make it up as I went along.
Yeah, but you observed senior pastors. You knew what they did.
I had opportunities that were amazing because I had been at Cathedral of Hope.
We need to take a break. We're talking to Carol West. She's the retired pastor of Celebration Community Church in Fort Worth. We're going to talk a little bit about the Rainbow Lounge and other things that she's been involved in right after this.
This is Rollins Gilliland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly, and I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink, and our guest is the Reverend Carol West. She's the retired pastor of Celebration Community Church, just retired in December 31st. And what did you do your first Sunday that you didn't have to work in 30 years?
I went to the movie and saw Bohemian Rhapsody.
Perfect.
Had a
How
beer
was
at
it?
the movie.
Had a beer at the
Yeah, we
movie?
had a beer at the movie. It was,
She was drinking on the Sabbath.
I was drinking on the Sabbath.
And not in small sips.
And
I gulped.
if anybody from her church is listening, I expect indignation.
Nah, they're fine.
You know,
They can handle it.
one of the things I've always kind of observed across my life as a Christian in and out of different churches is that a pastor usually has a big strength. They're either a really good administrator, they're a really good preacher, or a really good pastor in caring for their flock. What would you say was your big forte?
Well, oddly enough, probably loving the flock. I'm not a great administrator. I was in a situation where I was the only clergy on staff. I kept our overhead very low, and you know, I did a lot of programming. I would think up ideas. I would plan. I would, you know, but one person can't do it all.
Right.
And I think probably my strength, oddly enough, I think I learned it through doing funerals. Maybe I did Jewish funerals. I don't know, David. I believe
You
that
did.
funerals should be warm and loving.
And I can't even begin to count the number of funerals that I went to at Cathedral of Hope that you officiated at, and actually at Celebration. And they were warm, loving, they were about the person. You know, I went to one funeral back when I had my travel agency. We had a travel agent. He was from Kansas, and his parents were Pentecostal. And the pastor said during the service that Curtis was going to hell because he was a sinner, even though his last words were, "I have found you, Jesus, and I'm going home to be with my Lord." And I knew Curtis very well, and I know those were not his last words unless he was in some kind of delusional something.
Exactly.
But he wasn't. I mean, so, you know, and we're sitting there, and I leaned over to the person I had gone to the funeral with, and I said, how is that in any way comforting to the family? And she just grabbed my arm. She said, shush, these people are going to kill us.
Run.
Run, don't walk to the exit, yeah.
You know, there were a lot of funerals in the early days where you're told don't mention AIDS, or the family has told people he died of a bad case of flu or food poisoning
or cancer.
Cancer. He was in a wreck. And in the early days of AIDS, it was people would call the church and say, would you come visit my son? If they find out at our church, we'll be thrown out of the church. We can't ask our pastor to go, but would you go visit my son?
Wow.
It was, and even mainline churches then weren't where they are now. And you know, we did a lot of ministry and visitation and a lot of funerals for people because there wasn't...
Right, so it wasn't just the couple of thousand people who were going to Cathedral of Hope at the time. It was the whole community that couldn't go to their own church.
And, you know, I'd go over to ASD, I'd go to the DARE Center, I'd go to Nelson Thibodeau, and, you know, there was an outreach at all these places. But I also look at what AIDS also, for all the horrible things, in many ways it pulled our community together. Our community found its voice and its leadership, and in many ways we were one. And I think once we realized, you know, when I started working with AIDS, it was called Gay-Related Immune Deficiency Syndrome, GRIDS. And once we found out that it was indeed an equal opportunity virus, more and more people started stepping in. And I think many people in many places learned from the GLBT community how to deal with AIDS and care teams, and they watched our community. Dallas had it going. Dallas had it together.
Well, even into recent years, there have been sort of mainstream, if you want to call them that, churches that would deny the opportunity, even sometimes at the very, very last minute, to host a funeral for someone who had died of AIDS or HIV-related illnesses. And it's devastating to a family. You know, and I'm sure that you probably have encountered that in the past where they wouldn't allow someone to pick up a body or clean a body, or just the degree of fear. And
well, there were funeral homes that wouldn't handle the body.
I remember two situations. One was here in Oklahoma. Somebody called me and said, my partner's hemorrhaging, I don't know what to do. I said, call an ambulance, I'm on my way. I got there, and the ambulance drivers had said, does he have AIDS? And his partner said yes, and he said, sorry, we won't touch him, and they left. So I picked him up. We put him in my car and took him to Parkland. I had a situation in East Texas where...
Did he live through that incident, or no?
No, did not. I did a funeral in East Texas where, you know, at the end of the service, the pastor stands up by the casket, and the funeral directors are supposed to come down the aisle and close the casket. They did not. They stood at the back, and they would not budge. They would not touch the casket. So I went up and closed it, and I mean, I kind of tucked people in and closed it, and said, you know, come down the aisle now. But
at Cathedral, were most funerals open casket?
Because it depended upon the person. We had a variety.
Because I can't imagine most of the people that I know
during the AIDS crisis were closed.
Because they looked terrible at the point at which they passed away.
Back then, it was hard to hide the fact because of wasting syndrome and so many other...
and Kaposi's sarcoma that were just...
During the days of KS, KS was it was hard to hide. Exactly.
Now, a friend of mine from college, he went in the medical books. He was patient number 25, I believe.
Wow.
And he went in the medical with other people who had Kaposi sarcoma, because they didn't know it was related to AIDS even at the time, was that he was Jewish. Because Kaposi's was seen in older Jewish and Mediterranean men. And that was the only link they could find with him, and he was 25 years old. So he was the youngest person at the time to have ever contracted KS.
Yeah.
And we just didn't know what was going on.
I remember the first time I saw it, and it was horrible, and this individual had it on his tongue and on
so
his
painful.
skin, but it was hard to eat, hard to swallow, and it was disfiguring, but it was also
It's painful.
incapacitating and painful. Yeah.
On the skin, it wasn't.
It was a lesion.
Yeah, it was a lesion. It was just ugly, but
It was horrible.
when it was inside,
But internally, yeah.
I'm enjoying this conversation. How about
it
you,
was
Patty?
great, yeah.
Just great.
What a time.
Yeah, it was a terrible time.
Terrible
It was a
time.
terrible time, and we got through it for the most part. I was talking to Don Mason a few weeks ago, and he said he and Carol shared a cover of Dallas Voice one week because they were both retiring. And Don hasn't quite retired yet. He's retiring in a few weeks. But
It's just the slow method.
well, they're getting everything in place. They're renovating a new property, and he's getting all that going. And
His last act will probably be pull in the parking lot, never get out of the car, and pull out. And then he'll be done.
yeah,
Don's always renovating a new property. That's what I love about it.
that's true.
It's like,
He-
when are they going to be done fixing 35? I-35. Never.
They're almost done, actually. You drove down to Austin, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's getting there.
it's getting there. And you know what I was thinking? Yeah, they need to start widening this to 4 lanes. And do that for the next 30 years. Anyway, when I was talking to Don and I told him you were sharing the cover with Carol, Don said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I love Carol." He said, we've had a few deaths here recently, and we're saying, a lot of people don't know somebody who has died of HIV and AIDS. People do still die of it,
do.
or related
They sure do.
illnesses that are contracted as a result of it, or the medication after 20 years wears out certain organs.
You bet.
Even though they say no, that doesn't happen, but yeah, it does. Anyway, Don said, yeah, we had several deaths here a few weeks ago, and Carol was the one who came over. I said, isn't that nice? She came from Fort Worth. He said, I love Carol.
Don and I have. I went to AIDS Services of Dallas back when it was, the early days before all the expansion.
It was a place for us.
Yeah, they just needed someone, and I would go, once, twice a week and visit with people, got to know them, and develop that bond with the individuals who live there.
And that was interesting because Don is probably the most unreligious person I know. I mean, completely, and I'm sure that you encountered a little bit of resistance. Not
well,
from
he
not from
was
people living there.
skeptical at first because I was a minister, and he basically, I said, I'm not going to hit anyone over the head with the Bible, and I don't care what they believe or if they believe. If they want to talk, I'm here. If they need someone to play cards with them, I'm here. And
That's pastoral care,
Don accepted me, and whenever there was a death, I think what was important, people knew everybody deserves a funeral if they want one. And a lot of these individuals didn't have family who would claim them or whatever, except the folks at ASD. And when someone needed a funeral or wanted one, Don would let me know. Judith Powell was there. She'd let me know, and we'd go and do one at ASD. But I had a love for the folks there.
But that's real pastoring.
Yes.
Not beating somebody over the head with, you're dying because...
Nah. Like I said, viruses are equal opportunity.
Right.
We had a post on our post today about you being on the show, Carol, and we've just had a great comment from Lisa Messiah, who we should probably have on the show. She says, and I just made a donation to KNON because you are interviewing the marvelous Carol West.
Great. I love Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
And you weren't going to do pass the plate. There it is.
They're doing it for you.
Lisa, thank you.
You know, the other thing I want to talk about is the raid on the Rainbow Lounge. Because you were instrumental in calming things down and helping Fort Worth make real strides.
I was,
I know you don't want to take credit for it.
yeah,
but
I mean, I was there when it happened. I got texts like that night, and I thought, what the heck's going on? And, you know, there were a lot of people involved. Todd Kemp was having a birthday party there. He was there. Tom Annable was there. And a lot of us got together, and we started a group called Fairness Fort Worth. And initially I was asked just to go speak outside the Rainbow Lounge. I went to a deal at the courthouse, and we did a little march this is night, and I spoke at the Rainbow Lounge.
And let's explain what the raid on the Rainbow Lounge was, because it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, oh gosh, was it 10 years?
Yeah, something like that.
The Fort Worth Police Department and the
TABC.
ATF, made a little raid, and it was on Stonewall, and people were thrown on the ground, and their hands were zip-tied.
It's the 40th anniversary of the rebellion at Stonewall.
Yes, exactly. And Fort Worth had not experienced it.
Well, and to be fair, the police department honestly didn't know what it was, because I got a call from one of the higher-ups in the Fort Worth Police Department at the Dallas Voice.
Yeah.
What are they? What is this Stonewall? And I told them, and that's when they went,
Well,
"Ooh."
I made contact almost immediately with. I just thought, okay, I'm tired of this.
Oh, and by the way, 2 people were seriously injured in this raid because they threw them to the ground, and they had nothing to do with what was going on. What was going on was that it was supposed to be an inspection by TABC of this brand new bar that had just opened a week or 2 before that, and they were checking, the liquor bottles to make sure that that they had the right stickers on them, checking the plumbing and permits and all that kind of stuff, which is a normal thing. Every bar goes through that. It's very routine, and I had somebody from TABC explain to me exactly what should go on. And he was talking to me because he knew that this did not sound right, but he also didn't want us to make it sound like, why are they going to this gay bar? Because they went to every bar that was new and did this inspection. But what they did was, like you said, throw people to the ground, zip tie them if there was any sort of questioning. And normally, he explained to me, when they go into a bar, what they'll do is they'll say, we're doing a little inspection. If everybody will remain in their seats, or if you'd like to leave, that's fine. And it's very calm. Usually there's a female police officer who goes along with the male officers to make sure she can go into the ladies' room and check the plumbing to make sure the hot and cold water is working. And I had several people tell me that this should have been routine. And it just wasn't. Part of the reason was because they had just raided or run into something at another bar where there was a lot of nonsense going on, and the the TABC officers, TABC is the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, and they were hopped up from this earlier raid where a number of people were arrested. And
it blew up from there.
It blew up from there because it happened on Stonewall. Couldn't have happened on a worse day. Well, it could have. 50th anniversary would probably be worse than 40th. But I can't think, in the gay community, I can't think of a worse day for it to happen. And it just, everybody was denying that they did anything wrong when somebody who was a patron in the bar was injured. I mean, serious brain injury.
And there were conflicts in accounts that
Yes.
of what had happened.
Yes.
Between the police and those who had been patrons. And there. Well, tell us more about
It's
it.
nasty.
We need to take a break, but yeah, even the police chief, he started off completely on the police's side, and when he started investigating. Let's take our break, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. We're talking to Carol West. She's the retired pastor of Celebration Community Church in Fort Worth, and we'll be back with more Lambda Weekly right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink, and our guest is Carol West. She's the retired pastor of Celebration Community Church. She helped form Fairness Fort Worth after the raid on the Rainbow Lounge, and as Patti pointed out, would you let Carol tell the story her way? Well, Carol is very even-keeled, and this was a biggie. I mean,
It was nasty.
It was real nasty, and I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that, but it had a good outcome.
Yeah, I called the police chief, and I just said, you don't know me. I would like to come and meet with you. And I said, I'm not bringing the group. I'm coming alone. And he said, come on. And so I went and met with Jeff Halstead. And initially he was totally supportive of what the police had done. And we talked, and I wasn't in your face, but I was a little bit aggressive, and said, you need to investigate, let's check this out. And it blew up. People, the community was talking about marching in the street and all this. And Halstead started agreeing to meet with groups, and I decided at the church to calm things down. We would have a blessing of the police officers right in the midst of all this that was going on. I said, let's bless the police officers. And police officers in Fort Worth, we had some who were members at Celebration, and they were certainly afraid to come out. And so I invited the police chief and his wife and the high-ranking officers to come to a predominantly LGBT church right in the midst of all this mess, and come for a blessing. And I thought, what if you throw a party and no one comes? The police chief said he would be there, and he would bring his wife, and I asked, is it safe for officers who are LGBT to be out in Fort Worth? He said, most certainly. So we got our officers and everyone we knew who was LGBT and said, would you wear your uniform and bring your partner? And I'll never forget, Chief Halstead walked in with his wife on his arm, and we had 3 rows of police officers in uniform, and our officers wore their uniforms. And I remember the congregation going up and introducing themselves, but I remember many of the officers going up saying, this is my partner, this is my wife, this is my husband. And the congregation did a prayer over the police officers, and we prayed for finding unity in our diversity, and we gave them all a little St. Michael's medal, who's the patron saint of police officers. We did that, and my congregation gave him a standing ovation, and he said, we will work toward this. And I'll never forget, later on I developed a true friendship with Jeff Halstead. I love Jeff Halstead. And I said, you just thought Stonewall was a Southern general, didn't you? He said, I did. I did not know. and he later...
That is the thing. They honestly didn't know.
They did not know.
It was not planned.
They had not. They did not know. And later, when the truth came out that, things got out of hand, he recanted. Our congregation, I remember the days when a police officer coming to church I remember the days when the police would stand outside a church and take down license plate numbers so they could be published in the paper. And
Yeah, at Cathedral of Hope that happened.
Yeah, you bet it did. Your family, your
Michael was taken to jail one time.
Yes, he was.
Because he was asking somebody what they were
He
doing.
went out and asked the police, why are you arresting these people?
And they arrested him.
They arrested him. And I was starting to, create a scene right there and go, wait a minute. He said, no, someone's got to do the sermon. You get in there, do the sermon, and then meet me at the jail. So, those are the days. But Halstead, we gathered all the lawyers. We got pro bono lawyers. We had the FBI. We had the TABC. We had the Fort Worth Police. We all met it.
Well, because there are gay attorneys, there are gay FBI agents, there are gay police officers.
And I saw a lot of familiar faces.
And the other thing that happened with Jeff Halstead was he kept hearing the same story from people who were at the Rainbow Lounge.
He pursued it.
Yeah.
Yeah. His last weekend as police chief, he was in church, and he took the patch off his uniform and gave it to me. And I'll never forget that. And, we had a great relationship with him. Chief Halstead came up and cooked dinner for us at a Wednesday night Bible study. The police department came up, and he asked me to join several committees representing the city of Fort Worth. Fort Worth, I love Fort Worth. We developed some diversity training. We had diversity training for our city employees.
Actually, Fairness Fort Worth came up with, was it 18 points that they wanted the city to adopt?
We did.
And that was one of them.
Yes.
Was the diversity training.
And Mayor Price really, it started off with Mayor Moncrief and all these. It was a troubled time. Mayor Moncrief was there, and then Mayor Price stepped in, and
I remember Mayor Moncrief was there when we, DGLA, went over, Gil Flores and I went over to help train the trainer.
Yes.
And there's all the people who came out of the woodwork to be part of that. And then Mayor Moncrief insisted that the mayor and the council be trained first so that it would come from the top. And that impressed me so much.
Yes. And, it's been wonderful. Betsy Price stepped in after Moncrief. She came to the training, mayor, city council, and now every city employee. We trained, I don't know how many. We trained the police department, we trained the fire department, but we also trained everybody who worked at the golf courses and everybody who, worked for the water department. And,
it was classes of 25 every Friday. For 5 years, and it got the entire
week. And people might think, the water department, you know what? I have to go pay my water bill.
That's right.
I don't want to be treated any differently than anybody
else. The
else.
clerks at City Hall, everybody. And
you know what? They're probably working with other clerks at City Hall.
Of course they are.
LGBT.
And it's made, I think, Fort Worth a more open place.
Well, and I don't want to gloss over the 18 points. They were things like a non-discrimination ordinance, and Fort Worth had one of the first in the state.
Yeah.
Dallas already had one, but Fort Worth's was more comprehensive. There was transgender protections. That who was thinking about that back when Dallas's original
insurance transgender
insurance for transgender employees was included in there, and that was the sticking point. That was the last one, but finally got it through.
There was a diversity task force that had rendered a report and all of those things. It was really well done, and we got a lot done at the city of Dallas because we said, Fort Worth is doing it. And the council members would just really
Fort Worth,
right? Fort Worth is doing it. We got to get going.
And in a lot of ways, I think this opened the door for the LGBTQ community and the city of Fort Worth. We have a good relationship. Not only did we have it with Chief Halstead, we have it with Chief Joe Fitzgerald. And interestingly enough, I mean, I remember those days when there was harassment. You couldn't go to a LGBT church. We recently did our church does a Christmas cantata every year, big Christmas show. This year we did a 1940s radio play, and I invited Mayor Price. I said, hey, why don't you come on as Little Betsy Price and do an ad for us? Well, the day of the cantata, in walks Betsy Price and her contingency, and she got up there and was part of our Christmas cantata, our radio play, and she was so gracious. She stayed, and of course everybody wanted their picture made with the mayor, and she stayed for pictures, and she was delightful. And when we did the Pulse Vigil, we did a vigil for Pulse nightclub, and I invited the police chief and the mayor and the city council, and Zeta has always been very good to us. And I thought, well, they come. And the mayor came and said, gee, I brought some judges with me. I hope that's okay. I thought, are you kidding me? But yeah, the police chief and Zeta. I mean, I just feel like I know we have a long way to go. But for someone who's my age, I'm pushing 70, and for someone my age to see the progress that has been made in our community, yeah, we've got a lot to do still. But my gosh, I look at from whence we have come, and it's wonderful and amazing to me.
We're coming from a point where we couldn't call the police, really.
Oh yes, exactly. I mean, I remember. I led such a closeted life. I didn't come out to my parents until they saw me on television. My mother saw me on TV. She didn't know I was a minister. She certainly didn't know I was at Cathedral of Hope.
She still thought you were Jewish.
Yeah, she thought I was Jewish. Yeah, and the Klan came to church, and we were on TV, and Piazza said, I want you greeting them at the front door. And I was there in my alb, and my mother called when I got home. She lived near Tyler. And I thought, oh my God, don't let mother see the news. And my mother called and said, I saw you on TV. I said, you did? She said, yeah. And I saw you in that long white robe. I said, yes, Mother, I'm a minister there. And she said, thank God, I thought you were with the Klan.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's how I came out to my family.
Came out as a minister.
Came out as a minister.
Not a Klan.
Yeah, not a Klan member.
It sounds like that classic story when Melissa Etheridge was introduced to Julie Cypher's parents, and they were incredibly upset. And they weren't upset that their daughter was with another woman. They said, a rock musician?
or like at Jack's funeral from George and Jack, where the pastor was saying, for years they didn't join the church because George's parents were Episcopalian, and they promised that they would not leave the Episcopal Church. And so Eric Folkerth, who was doing the service, said, it hasn't been lost on us that the family had no problem that they were a gay couple living together in the 1960s, but Methodist?
Methodist, God forbid. Don't you gotta love Jack and George.
Yeah. So we're coming up toward the end of the show, and you spent 30 years as a minister, 20 years at Celebration, about 10 years at Cathedral, and its predecessor, MCC. What's next?
I don't know. I read this quote, that wonderful gay writer, Tennessee Williams, when I was trying to decide whether or not to retire. I read this quote by Tennessee Williams, and it says, sometimes it's just time to go, whether there's anywhere to go to or not. And I decided, okay, it's time to retire. I want to, everything's going well. Nobody wants to tar and feather me, and the church is happy, the money's good there. I don't want to stay too long. And I had just finished chemo and radiation, and I had my health back, and I thought, okay, it's
such
time.
a blessing.
Yeah, it's time, though. It's time. And I don't know. I mean, people say, what are you going to do in retirement? And I think, well, I don't know. I'm going to travel some. Angela and I have a little fishing cabin down at Cedar Creek Lake and a boat, and I like to fish. Angela tolerates it, and we fish, and I play lousy golf, but I seem to have a good time doing it. And I'm just going to kind of piddle around and do this and that.
Go to a movie and have a beer.
Go to a movie and have a beer.
And I'm sure ASD will still be relying on you and services, Dallas.
I hope so, yeah.
I have a feeling there are a whole bunch of other volunteer opportunities. Fairness Fort Worth could still use your help because stuff keeps coming up.
I enjoy the community. I've been blessed by this community. I've made a lot of friends, and it's been a good run. It's been a good run.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Congratulations on your retirement.
Well, thank you.
And we all look forward to it. When that day will come when I can just relax.
Yeah, and I'm just going to, Angela and I like to travel, and we're going to do a lot of traveling. She's
great.
still working. I'm older than she is. She still works, so, we're working in some vacations and stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And Josh just passed me a note. He's the president of Congregation Beth El Banah. I'm just a forever board member, and he did mention that there are some board positions that are open. It could bring you back to your roots.
They have lots of bagels for you.
Do they have lox and bagels?
We do.
What a deal.
Bring you back to your roots.
What a deal. What a deal.
I am so glad your health is back.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean,
Well, yeah.
you understand more than anybody what. Yeah.
I would like to have my hair back. It's not back. I don't know if it'll come back, but I've just. Angela reminds me frequently, hair's a small price to pay.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the least of it. Tell the story about when you took the wig off.
Well, I was being honored at Evening of Hope, AIDS Outreach Center, and the theme was unmask, take your mask off, and we were talking about AIDS, and I decided it's not right to stand up here in this wig and these fake eyelashes, and halfway during my speech I took the wig off and the eyelashes and finished it and said, a lot of people in the early days of AIDS could not hide, and I don't feel right standing up here talking about AIDS and hiding when other people couldn't. So that's why I don't wear a wig.
I think you're gorgeous the way you are.
Well, thank you. I am who I am.
No, hair is the least of it, and if that's what you gave up for good health,
that's right. I'll give that up.
It's the least important thing, and find some good things to do.
Thank you so much.
I know you will.
Yeah, it's been a joy being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful invitation.
Well, and this was, Carol said, her first time
in studio.
On the radio in studio.
In studio, yes, it is.
So you have to come back.
Wow, yeah. Now I know all the secrets and what it is, and some of the secrets.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, David.
Next week our guest is Candy Markham.
I believe so.
I believe so. Next week is the 1st of February. Yes, yeah. So Candy will be our guest. For all of us here at Lambda Weekly, be best.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.